Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Reset Podcast. I'm your host, Laura Munoz, CEO of the experience agency D-Flash. Each week on the Reset Podcast, I interview people who are doing game-changing things across a wide variety of industries. This is no exception. We're doing these South by Southwest live episodes, and I'm so excited to talk with Sophia Lopez, founder of Kaleido, about what she's doing and changing things in the world of blockchain, fashion, all good things. So Sophia, so glad to have you here.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks for inviting me.
So, every episode, I ask the same first question, and it's always fascinating to see how everyone's first job correlates to what they do now, and I bet you're no exception. So, Sophia, what was your first job?
Great question. I didn't have that much time to think about it ahead of time, but I guess my first paid job was when I was a freshman in high school. Actually, I worked as a bus girl in German Austrian restaurant, which was about 10 or 15 minutes from my house.
Where?
I grew up in New York City.
Oh, you're a city kid.
Excuse me?
You're a city kid.
Yeah, I'm a city kid.
Awesome.
So, I was sort of halfway between where I went to school and my home. But yeah, I'd go after school. I'd get off. I went to Aviation High School in Long Island City.
Oh, wow.
They just start letting women in.
Awesome.
There were 700 freshmen in my class that were all guys and 7 women.
Wait, you were one of 7 out of 700?
Yeah, there were 2,500 kids in the school. So we had a hangar with airplanes. It was a vocational program where you could qualify to sit for the FAA mechanics licenses for airframe and power plant, which I did do and I got when I graduated. So I'm licensed to fix commercial jets.
This is going to be an amazing interview, I can tell already.
Okay. Well, that's probably more interesting than my job. But I worked 3 or 4 days a week after school from get there after school around 4 and stay till 11. And
Till 11?
Yeah, closing down the restaurant, cleaning up. I know. I think we were skirting them. And I just needed I paid for my food. I paid for my clothes. I mean, it was just sort of using the money to fund my high school activities.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And what did you learn from those jobs, that first job?
That
you hated it and you didn't want to work in service?
No, one is that what did I learn? It's funny because I'm very much against nepotism. So I was like, wow, I brought my sister into the job, my younger brother, and the 3 of us were working there through high school, and the other friends, because they're always looking to hire, in a restaurant, there's a lot of turnover.
Of course, they want the young folks.
So, yeah, so I don't know what that means I learned. I like to help other people, I guess, but I don't like nepotism. But anyway, it's I think the service mindset of just what can you do? You see there's a gap, a problem, just go fix it, and then just doing whatever it takes to make business run from sort of the ground up. I guess there was a pecking order. I was a bus girl, so there were waitresses who were the main, so just yes, you're navigating some of that, and then you see all sorts of customers. So I think it's always good to have had some sort of job in the service industry earlier in your life, so you understand some of the dynamics there. And I mean, whatever you're doing, we're always trying to be of service to others, but you could see how people react when you're on the other side of the table and you're being served, and how to treat others well and all of that. So, but yeah, I ended up, you were saying it could sort of influence, or there's a relation to what people ended up doing. I mean, I had a lot of other jobs. I paid my way through college. I went to Harvard, got an engineering degree. But my parents did not want me to go to college because they wanted me to take my mechanics degree and work in the airport. So I had to pay. I got some scholarships, and I worked all through college. And those ones are a lot more representative of where I am today. So I worked in a couple startups. So I was the first employee of one startup, and they're still very successful. 25 years later, often quoted on the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Wow.
And then I was employee number 15 of another startup when I graduated, and now they're a global company, ranked top 10 consulting firm in the world for best place to work in consulting, but a well-known consulting firm. So I got sort of the entrepreneurial bug. Then I really enjoyed being in that sort of environment. I always thought one day I would found a startup. But life took a lot of twists and turns. Worked in a number of other failed tech startups when I was in college, just as an employee. And I worked abroad. I worked in Guatemala. I worked in Mexico, Guadalajara. I studied abroad in London for a little while as well, and worked a bit in Europe. So I had all of that experience moving around, and then went back to get an MBA, and then worked for IBM for 10 years. I've been now. I was raising kids along the way. I have 4 children, so grew up in different countries, speaking different languages. So that's fun. Yeah, I've been a single parent for the last almost 14 years now. So that's been rewarding. I've 2 out of college and still 2 in college. So lots of stuff going on all at the same time.
So
yeah.
Not busy at all. You just been hanging out, like just doing stuff. And,
yeah,
all right,
yeah,
cool.
So then, prior to founding Kaleido, just to finish up the career trajectory, I was in a variety of different roles in IBM for strategy, marketing. I actually did sales for a couple of years just because I'd been more on the technical engineering and the business side, and I'd never done a sales stint. So really enjoyed solving problems and working with clients to bring all the technology pieces together for them. And then after that, I was a product manager. So you have the P&L and sort of running that piece of the business for your products. And I ended up having a big chunk of the systems mainframe business at my final roles there, like $3 billion P&L. And as part of one of those roles, having innovation portfolio, brought blockchain into that, side cloud analytics, mobile security, and just realized, a lot of clients are going to be looking at their next-gen payment rails or supply chain EDI, different, transaction processing, and looking at how blockchain could help transform these business processes. It's sort of the better, faster, cheaper. First the evolution, and then more of like a revolution of, the way internet now spawned, who would have thought Uber and Airbnb would come out the other end. Similarly, you'll first start with some incremental type improvements with more transparency and efficiency with blockchain, and then we'll see whole new business models come out of it. And actually was then leading the IBM blockchain platform portfolio, and we had launched 3 generations of the platform there, and saw, just working with customers, a lot of the same problems they were running into adopting this technology.
Which is so difficult for these companies.
Yeah, so really had a point of view with someone who works very closely with me there about how we could build something from the ground up that addressed a lot of those pain points. And it's all about like radically simplifying the adoption of technology and accelerating getting to the benefits and the promise. So we've been doing that for about 15 months now. And we launched last year in May, had a partnership with AWS. Now we have a big announcement this week at South by Southwest, Thursday morning at 9:15.
Okay. All right, so
it's under embargo, but I could tell you on the side, under embargo. But yeah, so we're here for that this week. I'm really excited working with clients across all industries and just seeing all the great things they're using blockchain for. Change the world.
Awesome. So you just blew through
my whole life story.
In like 30 seconds. Done.
Yeah, like a 2-minute monologue. But.
No, awesome. So tell us more about what Kaleido actually is and what you can say before the embargo gets lifted.
Yeah, it's a general purpose blockchain platform. So, and it's software as a service. So it's delivered via the cloud. And basically anyone who has a really great idea or use case, what they want to use blockchain for, up to now, before Kaleido, what the challenges people are running into is just first getting their arms around the core technology. So it's distributed P2P protocols, heavy crypto, heavily containerized, new programming languages and frameworks. And you look at companies, they just don't have that skill set yet.
Right, it's still too early.
Yeah, they're really excited by what they want to do with it, but they were spending months to years, millions of dollars in some cases, writing thousands of lines of code, just trying to get the bare sort of plumbing set up to like get a node up, wire them together, basic infrastructure. So we want to get people more to the business value and focused on applying their industry domain expertise, bringing their relationships to the blockchain, not spending all their time and resources trying to rebuild a layer that's like basically a commodity layer for them. And then the next level of challenge, if they manage to get out of the proof of concept phase, is at the pilot. Now you have maybe 5 or 6 people participating together around a use case, and they have now real data. And all of these companies individually, they're used to running and managing their own applications, but this is a completely different paradigm because it's something we like to call shared IT. So instead of you sort of hugging your data and owning your own applications and maintenance of your systems, you're basically sharing one copy of the data with all these other participants across all of the, where they run and manage their IT. And then one copy of the application logic. So people were running into a lot of challenges. I was just at this healthcare conference called HIMSS, and there was a consortium of 6 healthcare providers who have a really great use case, and they proved out the business benefit. Everyone in the audience is like, "Ooh, I want to join. Can we sign up?" And it's like, well, they said they can't sign anyone up because they need to figure out the tech infrastructure and how do they onboard new members. So Kaleido, first it takes minutes to get a network up and running. We manage, run it, maintain it for you. But you can just onboard a new member. You can elastically scale. Just send an invitation and someone could join. They'll own their piece of the network. No one controls the whole network. So the tools and workflow and sort of governance, these are all things that we're helping, provide the substrate for with clients. And then built-in analytics, they can see the health of their node in the network. So all of that is something that has to be done to help sort of, provide this distributed, decentralized blockchain solution for them. And then the third challenge is getting into production. Is like all of the new challenges of blockchain married to the traditional challenges of enterprise. So hardening, scaling, performance, reliability, integrating with their existing systems and sources of data. So we actually have launched a marketplace last year as well that has all of the really key decentralized technologies. In addition to running the chain, which is like 5 or 10% of a total solution, you're going to want these complementary solutions as well. And some are third party and some are part of ConsenSys, and some are ones that we've built. We've open sourced some back to the community as well, around like privacy, identity, bringing real data into the blockchain through oracles. That's a Chainlink, which is a popular third-party sort of open source community. Open law for legal agreements.
So
supply chain, business process modeling, tooling. Yeah, yeah.
And so for you, how are you guys sort of making it sort of simple to do it for everybody? Because folks are still confused and like, is blockchain a place? No, it's software.
Yeah.
But how do you sort of see it as like the simplest way to kind of get people to understand why there's tons of value in working with blockchain?
Yeah. Well, first apart, just how do we make it simpler? So, being a cloud solution, you just log on, Kaleido.io. We have a free tier. You could just get on there, build a blockchain consortium, invite members to it, stand up an environment in minutes.
And that's it?
Yep.
Wow.
Yep. You could do it right now, Kaleido.io. And it's all about, we want to offer flexibility and choice. So as you're experimenting and moving quickly, sort of looking at the ROI, if your use case, you can try out different blockchain open source protocols, which we're running on top of different consensus mechanisms. So the way that you sort of come to an agreement with the network. The other members of your consortium is another term that you use for that. So just it's all click button simple. So that I think really helps people get out of sort of that technology layer and
the cloud of that.
Yeah, and then cloud helps because in the past, if you have to buy servers, stand up your own infrastructure, we have government agencies who've been working with us, like tuberculosis disease surveillance. Normally, just the procurement takes longer than it took for them to build this whole solution out.
Right.
And they're replacing an 18-year-old messaging system that gets all the states together around early, surveillance around these. In this case, it's tuberculosis, but there's 96 different disease conditions that are being tracked, and this is a benefit of all of us if we can, better share that sort of data. And usually these older systems just have pain points that have been left unaddressed.
Exactly,
so even
right.
if you create even a shadow ledger with blockchain that runs alongside, there's still a lot of value, like things around dispute resolution, reconciliation, just better visibility and line of sight.
And people can't cheat it. I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of where, I'm seeing it as I've done a few of these different sides of the universe with blockchain interviews, and it's really about the fact that it is secure and you can't cheat. It's it's you. There's a ledger, you're good to go. Fantastic. So how in the world do you go from Harvard to IBM to deciding this is going to be the startup I'm going to start? What was the moment where you're like, all right, I want to go do Kaleido?
Yeah, I guess when I was internal and working there, and I had a lot of jobs before I went back to business school. So I had an engineering undergrad, worked for a number of years, then got a full-time MBA, and then was at IBM. So I think I always was someone who was more of an entrepreneur, even in those other roles where I was in a larger company. But it's hard when you're in a big company. You can say you're a startup, but you're never really a startup. So I think it's the sort of thing you're not going to know what it's like until you just throw yourself off the cliff and do it. So
that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
It is literally throwing yourself off a cliff.
Yeah, and I really trusted the person I was working with. So we already had been working with each other in the blockchain space for a year and a half prior. So I thought, this is someone we're very complementary strengths. Actually, we have two technical co-founders, and one of them said, you guys are like yin and yang. So I'm like, that. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. So certainly think it'd be hard, this type of ambitious endeavor, to do that as a solo founder. So, I mean, there certainly are some types of businesses where that would be completely appropriate, but we're looking to scale and, build $1 billion business here.
Really?
Yeah. We've already ranked the #1 platform for blockchain by analysts, and the most recent study came out.
So say again so our audience can hear this, because I think it's really important, because we hear so much about what blockchain is and who's behind it. But you, as a female founder, own what now?
The #1 blockchain platform is ranked independently by analysts. Yeah, well, we even by the end of last year when we launched the paid plans, we'd been in market since May. We have 150 million blocks cut on our blockchain. We have over 4,000 nodes. We're running close to 2,000 blockchain networks. We have 1/3 of the top 20 banks in the world running on our platform.
It's pretty amazing. Shout that from a rooftop. Come on, Sophia.
Yeah. So we've got, big brands who've been running different, like on the digital collectibles and marketing, media and entertainment, like Sony, Fox, Heineken, retail space like Kroger, T-Mobile, working with partners who are running digital couponing solutions on our platform. So, yeah, it's been amazing to see and gratifying to see sort of with the product market fit really helping address the problems we saw in the market, all the adoption we've been able to get and move quickly. And in terms of, being rated #1, it was against, in that particular evaluation, 12 different dimensions, numerical scoring. So it was pretty scientific, against Microsoft, Oracle, SAP, Amazon, Azure, and IBM.
And you beat them all.
Yep.
Incredible. Can you lead with that from now on? It's like, so all these other dudes, we've kicked their behinds. Because I think it's really, really important that people understand that, like, it doesn't come from, it's never just about the old school technology companies who are making game changing products. It's newer, faster, more efficient, but people who come from this industry and are business leaders to start. It's not just some kids.
Yeah, I think in the blockchain space, first of all, I'm really happy that clients, I do believe in flexibility and choice, and I think having multiple open source protocols, and there's a lot of investment there, different players in the space offering different types of solutions, just help bring all of blockchain forward, because it's really something transformative that can help people. So I see almost more of like a co-opetition, like there's ways we can partner and help each other, and there's ways we're going to end up, competing. I also think people, if you look at buckets of who came into the blockchain market out of the big names, the cloud vendors are looking at blockchain as like, maybe they have 100 services in their catalog, and it's like, now it's service 101, and they're looking at dragging and their whole cloud platform into this deal because they want to drive all their business, and they're not necessarily know blockchain that much. They're looking at it as like another commodity service that they could just offer and see what people can do with it. So that it's not really going to help clients as much because they don't have the knowledge at the business level, what clients are looking for to help shape that offering, and not necessarily even evolving the offering with the protocol expertise. It sort of might get frozen in time. They offer something, throw it out there, and it's like, you see what you can build, sort of do it yourself. And the biggest, I guess, inhibitor for the cloud, if it's a cloud vendor, is that blockchain is really a decentralized solution. So if you're moving off of like an on-premise siloed system because you want to have this shared view of the data and really get the efficiencies, people don't want to. You might start experimenting in one place, but you don't want to get stuck in another silo. So that's what we offer, is really borderless blockchain. So you can start in one place, and as you grow your diverse networks, people are, if a retailer might say, we have a policy, we don't run on AWS because we're a retailer and they compete with us. We need other options.
Like, here you go.
Yeah, so having that diversity of options means you can now attract, some of the broader network and the diversity of where they're going to want to run. And we have some clients, one that started coding in July and went in production in December. And these are very large enterprises. Some of these banks I mentioned, Shell and others. Normally they're in a code freeze after Thanksgiving, but this is so December 20th went live.
Still
with credit because they're like, we've got to realize, the benefit has so much potential for us when we're moving forward. But so they started with 15 major stakeholders, but they have, it's an open financing platform, but over 1,200 participants who could benefit. So you want to create it as seamless and remove all the friction of them being able to join. So having that as a software as a service, having different tiers in the consortium. So if you're like one of the big dogs and you're like, I want to have, the maximum amount of control. I want to be part of voting on the ConsenSys and signing material and all of that signature on the blockchain. And others might say, I want to participate and get the business benefits, but I don't want that level of participation. So there's different tiers. So offering all of those options and thinking more at the business level of what it takes to bring these business relationships to the blockchain versus just here's a node and we'll run the node for you. Which is, so I think those are some of the reasons why in the evaluations we're scoring so high, because people are coming from different angles, which are more of like trying to promote their core business versus building something that really helps address the blockchain problem and what people are trying to do with building blockchain networks and consortia of companies who are looking to bring these use cases together.
So it's awesome that you guys are essentially a one-stop solution for a lot of these folks.
Yeah, because between running the chain, which is like 5 to 10% of a total solution, we have the marketplace, which has many of the other decentralized layers and sort of even industry-specific content in them. So that's a truly full-stack solution, we like to call it. I know it sounds a little jargony, but it's basically defined it in context, so hopefully that's okay.
No, it's totally fine.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So it's fascinating to me because I'm just seeing so much more about blockchain. I'm learning so much every time I interview somebody else who's doing great things in blockchain. Yeah. I'm just like, oh my gosh, I just want to read and learn more. So if I'm a marketer and I want to start understanding how blockchain could affect our business, or I'm in advertising, where does ground zero for me? Where do I start?
Yeah, I think there's a lot. It's a great question. I think there's been a lot written about blockchain. So you could probably look at what peers in your industry have already thrown out there and shared in terms of great use cases. You could see if anyone has actually, how far they've gotten with them, have they gotten results and implemented that. So you always want to learn from those who've gone before you. And at this point, I'd say most industries, last 4 or 5 years, there have been thought leaders and innovators in those industries who've already been experimenting. And it's interesting compared to other technologies I've worked with that were new, like cloud analytics, mobile, all of that. People in general kept stuff closer to the vest, but for some reason with blockchain, people are just shouting from the rooftops like, "We have this great idea, and we're announcing we're gonna start a pilot," even before they would do something.
Wow!
So I think it's a little more accessible to see maybe what the state of what people have tried before is out there. And then I think depending on where people sit, you really have to think about some of the business relationships, who you think could benefit, sort of more of the strategy, legal and governance aspects. Does it make sense for there to be a separate entity set up that then now all of these members can join and work together? So, and then there's the technology decisions, and I mean that's what we're there to help with on the technology side. But using something that's click button simple, you get on, software as a service. I mean, that's, I think you could definitely get started there. And I'm trying to think what other advice I would give people. I mean, find really good partners. We're currently, we grew out of ConsenSys' venture studio model. So I'd say ConsenSys is great because it has all layers of various avenues to get help. So if you're really at that use case stage, you can work with the solutions, which is a consulting team, and they can help with advisory, more traditional strategic consulting, design thinking side. token economics. So you think about how could the sort of fractionalization of assets and creating this new sort of marketplaces and economies, getting some help and learning from what other people have done there. And then you can, even if you don't have the skills to write a decentralized application or the smart contracts, just, as consultants out there, including, ConsenSys team, that can help coding the application side of things. This is where you're going to sort of codify your industry expertise and what you're trying to achieve. And then you point that at Kaleido, and we manage and run and operate it for you. And
awesome.
Yeah.
I think we're definitely going to put all the show notes about Kaleido and ConsenSys and ConsenSys Labs, but I think, you guys do a fantastic job of sort of being that software and being that software as a service for everyone, but also being that kind of guiding principle along the way. You came out of the studio, now you're launching, you're the number one badasses. I mean, like this, that's...
I like number one badasses. I like that.
Hey, listen, this is...
Right. This is get a bumper sticker.
Yeah, I think that might be the title of this episode. So, you glossed over something that I want to go back to. That you said that you're a single mom and you have 4 kids.
Yeah.
And you've been a fantastic executive for years. How did you do that?
That's not easy.
Didn't think it was.
Yeah, I'm one day at a time. And I think, as a parent, trying to really, and it's my philosophy, just managing teams and leading teams, just try to find what everyone's strengths are, what they're passionate about, and drives them. So my kids, and that they have sort of the personal responsibility and ownership. Since I had 4 and it was one of me, it's like, well, I couldn't mandate that they, like, you have to swim, you have to play piano, you've got to do this.
Of course,
it's like,
right.
If any of you really want to do something extracurricular, let me know, and I'll figure out how to pay for it and how to pick you up, drop you off, or carpool or whatever. But they had to want to do it. I had a lot of peers where they were just complaining, oh, I'm paying all this money and I'm forcing my daughter doesn't want to practice piano. I'm like, I had one who was doing piano. She'd practice like 2 hours or 3 hours. She'd just play and play and play. She loved it. So, of course, I'm really happy to provide the opportunity for lessons and a piano in the house. But it was sort of an interesting, when you're not going to just mandate and try to force someone down a road. It's more of sort of cultivating, seeing what their interests lie and sort of encouraging that and just coaching and mentoring. There was some, with my kids, I had one who I never saw doing homework until he was like a junior, second half of his junior year. But he ended up being a great student, got straight A's in high school, but he always did the bare minimum.
Yeah.
And I just was like, I had moms who were like, you should intervene and you should make him do all this extra hard stuff and participate in these enrichment. And I'm like, he's figuring out with 7 different classes how to get an A in each one, but he's getting 91 or 92. He's not doing extra credit. But he's figuring out how to have a balanced life. He wants to get a good grade, but he wants to do other things. I'm like, I could learn from that.
Exactly.
So it's sort of like accepting diversity of approaches and priorities and not trying to mandate, like, there's one way to do it and it's this way. And then I think in terms of grades, I felt with all of them, they had to want it. And it wasn't like, if you don't come home with straight A's, something bad's going to happen to you. But ironically, then they ended up being good students because they felt really engaged.
You empowered them.
Yeah, and I was there to support them with whatever they needed. I think it's really similar, growing a company or leading a team. Like, you have to find what motivates people, what they're passionate about, and you're sort of highlighting the positive in what, feedback and all of that. So I guess that's one thing that really helped me just, for the 5 of us just all these years, is that they took a lot of ownership in it. But I think there were a lot of lessons there that carried over into work in terms of what really, I think, drives people and helps position them to be successful.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think that's a great way of looking at it, because it's so not easy. It's like I'm amazed by my mom, and there were 3 of us, and we were always driving her crazy. So I can't imagine being a single mom with 4, and you're like, oh my god.
I think some traditional issues parents have, if you're pushing too much and mandating, and then also for more like balanced kids against parents, then you have like, I'm not going to dress like you because your way of dressing is lame-o, or they just have to establish their own identity because of that tension. And I never, in that respect, there were a lot of battles I just didn't have because they felt like we were all in the same boat together, and they felt like helping, and it wasn't like, this authority push back against totalitarian regime or something, So it's interesting seeing how those dynamics, I guess it's just all psychology, but...
Yeah, then it translates into work. It's the same thing in terms of managing personalities and expectations. So it's pretty incredible. Yeah. So what would you tell the 25-year-old Sophia? Because I'm sure you learned a ton of lessons along the way. So looking back on it now, what do you think you'd say?
That's a good question. I guess one thing I've thought over the years is you're sort of the person you are by like high school and college. So you don't change that much. You know, there's that core who you are. So, in terms of advice, I mean, I think the philosophy of sort of getting to know yourself and knowing what your own strengths are, and then areas that you just don't naturally gravitate towards as much, or strengths you don't really use or focus on as much. Just the idea of being realistic about that. Because sometimes we're hard on ourselves and we think we want to be everything to everyone all the time. And we're perfectionists.
Especially as women.
Yeah. And what people expect us to be.
Perfect.
At everything all the time. So if you're honest with yourself and you know where you have... I'm really a big fan of the Gallup Strengths Finder.
Oh, what's that?
Promotional plug here.
Do tell. Plug away.
Well, Gallup, I think there's over 15 million people who have taken this assessment. But the idea, and there's a whole book, StrengthsFinder 2.0, Now Discover Your Strengths. The idea is, in school, we're always trying to shore up our weaknesses. So you're like, I'm only getting to 72 in calculus. I want to try to get to an 80, whatever. But, and that's fine. Like, you're learning basic skills. But then we carry that into life, and we're trying to sort of cover up or patch up our weaknesses. And they're saying, what if you really knew where your talent multipliers are? And where you have your superpowers. And let's say you, Laura, are really great communicator and drawing out stories and engaging with people. So you're maybe you didn't realize this about yourself, and you were trying to just get better at, crochet. You're
right.
That darn crochet. I'm terrible at those fine motor skills,
Right.
But if you know that you really have these strengths around communication and storytelling and sort of influencing others, what if you took those extra classes, you honed this, you took some risks, and you went from being in that 98th percentile to you could be the best in the world at that, right?
Huh.
So knowing so the Strengths Finder, there's a simple version, you just get your top 5 strengths, and then, or you could do the complete where you unlock all of your strengths. And they give you a really detailed report on sort of how do you work well with others, what should people know about you, who do you pair well with. So you might be, basically it's 4 buckets. And that just even the buckets were interesting as you put teams together. There's people who can... I've had people on my team... So I've offered this to teams as a voluntary thing, and people really like it. They like getting to know about themselves and others. But I've had some folks who were top 5 strengths all were strategic. So there's ideation, intellection, input, learner... and they had no execution strengths in their top 5. So it's no wonder you can't get a marketing plan out the door.
This explains everything.
You're too busy thinking about all the awesome concepts and how are we going to cross the chasm and all of that.
And no one else has to actually build the bridge.
Yeah. And meanwhile, there's some people who are extremely strong on the execution side. And actually, it's been said, my old company, there was this coach I brought to work with us, and she's there's a lot of execs, they can execute, they're great at executing, but they execute themselves right off a cliff. If you don't have the sort of strategic strengths as well, sort of guiding, you could be rudderless if you're so focused on, when we made a plan and we're going to stick to it
no matter what. Right.
Yeah, so you're at the conference, and you're they gave us a slot on the last day of the whole week, but that's our slot. We're not going to go back and ask for another one because we've, mentally we've decided.
Yes.
It's well, we're right here. Let's just go ask them to get, it's sort of going with the flow and trying to make the best of situations. And then there's people strengths, so getting things done one-on-one with people, and more relational, and then influencing. How can you really get a whole group of people behind something?
So how to be a co-leader.
Yeah, well, you see, these strengths could be used for the wrong reasons, too. So there's the value you assign to how you use them, I guess, is sort of your individual values coming through. But yeah, I think being aware of that earlier in life, so then if you just realize where you can help others the most, how you can position others, who you can team with. So if you know you're a big idea person, that there's probably good to pair with someone who's maybe analytical, who's going to poke a lot of holes and ask, well, how are you going to do that? Or maybe someone more execution oriented, so you can fully flesh out an idea before you spring it. on a group. I have a friend who's an amazing thought leader, and has 2 reactions from people, and she's a great speaker. She was actually here at South by Southwest last week speaking at the EDU conference. But I've seen over the years, there's people who get so galvanized by what she's saying and so passionate, and she's done amazing things. All areas with the government and commercial, and she was a leader in the gaming industry and is now doing stuff in AI and blockchain and all of that. But so people get it, and they love everything she's saying, and they're like, how can I, join in this initiative and amplify? And then the other group is like, she's like, I just presented, and it was all crickets. It's like people who are just very grounded in the day-to-day and how would this work and the execution, and they're not ones who like live in the world of the art of the possible, So just thinking, when you put teams together and you really want to drive action, how do you sort of bring together different people so that all other strengths work in a complementary way? That's in a very long answer to what advice would I give to myself when I...
No, I think it's fantastic, and I love the strength finder. I need to like figure this out, because I feel like I'm a few of those, and depending on which version of me is working today. So if it's Laura the interviewer versus Laura the producer who creates all these things, where it's like, this will get done, but then also I'm we'll figure out a way to not be the last person here. Like there's somebody I can ask to make sure we get bumped to the front of the line.
Yeah.
So I feel like I'd be a pretty interesting hybrid. So
it's very personalized. Like there's 34, I believe it's 34 strengths. But when you get those paragraphs, they're really, I think it's like 1 in some odd million, 1 in 13 million that anyone would get the same description as you. Because those strengths are really flavored with the order of all the other ones. So one might be an influencing strength, but it could be done more like on a person-to-person level. You could be influencing and even much more execution-focused, and more ideas-focused, more communication, storytelling. I mean,
awesome.
So, and it helps you realize ways that maybe sometimes you're less effective than you could be, just because you'll see when you take it.
Oh, this might be my plane activity when I'm on my way back to New York. And when you were doing the assessment, what did you find for yourself?
Yeah, so I do have one execution strength, which is achiever in my top 5, so that's good. So I basically
Shocker.
brute force the achievement though, because most of the other strengths are on the strategy. So I've strategic and ideation, and then individualization, which makes sense, which is seeing every person as an individual and sort of tailoring what you could do for them and how you could work together. And let me think. I think I missed one there. Strategic, ideation, visualization, achiever, and learner. So I love learning. So that makes sense, because I'm always, even when I was at IBM, it's like every 2 years I was in a new role, because I was like, okay, I've learned 80+% of what I'm going to learn here. I want to go do something new and sort of challenging yourself. And blockchain's a great space to be in with that mindset. Actually, we did this with our whole team now on Kaleido, and we have a lot of learners on our team.
Makes sense.
We also, the coach was telling us, well, you don't have many people who are blind spots with the bottom 3, because we did the full thing. So your strengths that you don't use as much was like consistency and process. I'm like, it sort of makes sense. We're a startup.
Yeah.
Like if we had someone who's like, we need a rule book and you need to do it the same
you wouldn't
way,
be functioning.
And this one thing happens, so we need to make a rule so it never happens again. It's like, yeah.
Dang,
so those
work
people,
at this.
maybe we get more of those. But we do have, a lot of ideation, which is good, and a lot of learners. Yeah. So.
Very cool. Because I think, you're always constantly learning, especially with regard to technology. And there's never going to be this one finite thing of what you absolutely know. So we're March of 2019. Where do you think Kaleido is going to be a year, 24 months from now?
Yeah. Well, we're a part of the ConsenSys Venture Studio model, but we are just starting the process to spin out and be our own legal entity, which is part of the normal growth path of one, and numerous other projects have spun out and become separate companies. So by next year, our own company probably double in size, employee-wise. We're based in downtown Raleigh, so we're all co-located. We have our technical team and our product designers, product management, and marketing all together. So we can, I think that's
rare. It's great.
Well, we've done it deliberately. I used to lead and manage global teams, and you could do a lot virtually, but when it's in a new space and you're building the product, and we have an amazing user experience, which you'll see when you go on to the
I'm
product.
signing up as soon as it's over. You know I am.
So having that tight integration, like we make 3 or 4 important decisions a day. You can do that, and you were whiteboarding and coming together, and so being very efficient with our time. I think 5 or 6 years down the road, being valued as a $1 billion company is in our
more female-led unicorns.
So far we've exceeded all our milestones we set out in our first 15 months. So it's been really great. Yeah.
So crushing everything under creation, basically, and leaving all the huge companies in their wake.
Well, we're working with the huge companies to help them with their blockchain initiatives.
So they're all your clients. So.
Yeah. We're just meeting people where they are and trying to just help them sort of solve those key problems that for years, I mean, some of these people, these are decades-old systems. People, 30-year-old systems, they're re-platforming. It's pretty amazing. And we're working with some really cool people across all these different companies because people who are gravitating towards blockchain in the early years, I mean, more visionaries, really smart, really know their business, and who just really want to change things. And if you look at, there is someone who, when we first launched last year in May, came to us after we were on stage, the main stage at this conference in New York, and he's like, I had a 9-month project, and now just went on, logged on to Kaleido, saw what you got, set up my network. We're going to be able to do it in less than 3 months because we're running on. This is a government agency. He actually talks about this publicly at different events, and I'll just share what he said at a local HIMSS conference in Georgia. But it's tuberculosis disease surveillance, and this almost 2 decades old system is with the CDC. And you normally would think, well, the CDC would take a year just to buy the
anything, right?
Yeah, but a combination of really smart, really dedicated people who really know the problems they're trying to solve to help their constituents, and in this case, it's like all of us living here in the U.S.
Kind of important,
our families' health and all of that, and just seeing this as a way for them to just move so much faster. As we get to work with really bright, engaged people like that every day. So there's another projects that we've won in the Philippines. We announced actually when we were on stage last year, financial inclusion. So was the chairman of the board of this bank in the Philippines, and he's like, I'm Filipino, 35 million Philippines are unbanked. And the rural banks that serve them are unbanked too. They're not even connected to payment rails like SWIFT, which is a popular one. So you have people working abroad, and they try to send money back to their families. It's usually like a lot of women will go work abroad in other countries and domestic capacities. And then the money, so much is cut away from the money they're sending because they're unbanked, and it's all of these wire transfers and loan shark
fees
type people.
No.
Yeah, so starting with domestic remittances. And now they've, onboarded 120 of these banks. I think they have 200 branches and all these other partners, and just growing a whole roadmap of solutions for financial inclusion, which is amazing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you guys are literally changing the world.
Yeah.
So what would you say, in your experience over the last 20-odd years in terms of working, has been the biggest challenge that you've faced, and how you were able to overcome that?
I think the biggest challenge, this is more of, it's advice for anyone. I think the biggest challenge is you might start on a certain life trajectory. And I said I was living in other countries, and then I was, at one phase in my life, just sort of working more opportunistically because I had, 4 kids. And it came a point in my life where I'm like, I need to support them. I need a good paying job. I want to work in a company that would invest in my potential where I could grow instead of just, hey, you can do this today, service in this capacity. So I think the challenge is if you're in a certain community and other people are all doing other things. So at that time I knew a lot of, people who were not in the corporate world, and they're stay-at-home moms, and I'm like, I'm going to go back to business school and get a full-time degree. And I had 4 kids, and it's normally the full-time MBA is people who are 27, 28,
right,
and they're just worked for a couple years, haven't even started a family yet. So I was reading some articles and just saying, well, do other people go back and get an MBA at this stage in life? And there's just women in MBA. There aren't that many women in MBA programs. And I was reading crazy stuff. I mean, I was in the Wall Street Journal and New York Times. They're like, well, women don't do an MBA because they're afraid of math.
What?
I know. And I was like, in today's day and age, these articles are saying things like that.
God.
And then saying, how can we get more women into business school? Oh, we need to recruit them earlier before they get too far into their 20s. And I'm like, how about women who have life experience and have worked and can bring that level of maturity, to
the classroom.
Yeah, So I think a big challenge sometimes is seeing beyond what the convention is and maybe what society or your peer group thinks is normal and just saying, I could do this, and breaking conventions and sort of forging a path in a new place. It's hard because you sort of look at others to benchmark what's possible. So I think that can be a challenge for people sometimes. And I think the example I gave is more oriented to women, but for men it applies too. I mean, someone could start in a certain career path and maybe parents wanted them to be a lawyer, now they're a lawyer, but their heart is really somewhere else. And then they wake up one day and they're 35 or they're 40 or they're 45. It's never too late to go and do something that you're passionate about. Only have one life and it's only so many years. So I think just not to let what others think is the convention or what's normal limit people, because people have unlimited potential to do whatever they want.
That's an amazing way to end this podcast. As if we planned it that way. Sophia, it was such a delight having you on the show. And we're going to add all of these amazing show notes about Kaleido, about the Strengths Finder, which I'm going to do in the plane. I swear I'm going to do it. And anything else about what ConsenSys is up to, because it's fantastic to see what their companies are spitting them out.
They're amazing people. I'm sure if you have a chance to talk to some of the other projects and groups here today, you'll hear just as interesting stories or more interesting stories. So.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you so very much. And that's the end of our show. Thanks, everyone.